Thank you so much, everyone. Before we start the session, I would take the privilege to read out the bio note of Professor Das. Professor Ashit Kumar Das holds a PhD in engineering from Bengal Engineering and Science University in 2011 and then M.Tech and B.Tech in Computer Science and Engineering from Calcutta University in the year 2002 and 1996 respectively. With more than 100 publications over journals, conferences, book chapters, his research focuses on machine learning, big data analytics, data mining, AI, NLP, social networks, bioinformatics, and text, audio, and video data analysis. So without wasting much time, because we are already running late, I will hand over the podium to Sir. Sir, please.
Very good morning to all of you, and first of all, thank you for introducing me, and I am very thankful to the head of the department, Professor of the Computer Science Department, Professor Arindam Das, of course, and the other professors of Computer Science Department and the allied Computer Science departments for inviting me in this conference to share my thoughts with the participants and the other faculty and audiences. So, today, actually within this short period, I will try to discuss very simple things but very much important and relevant to the conference. Actually, in this talk, I will try to discuss some few concepts of artificial neural network and the advanced artificial neural network, like say, including the deep neural network, and how we can use this for some applications based on say IoT. So whenever we, as we know that the artificial intelligence is the main, means the subject if you consider, then under this there are so many subfields like say machine learning, and within this machine learning there is the concept of deep learning and so on. So in both the cases, either machine learning or deep learning, our objective is to just extract the important, meaningful information from the data set. The data set may be of different domains, that may be of from medical image or text, audio, videos, signals and so on. But the first task is we have to extract this type of data, and then we apply different machine learning techniques and to find out the hidden patterns that exist within the data set based on the decision making. So feature engineering is one of the most important concepts, that is actually we are trying to extract the important features, or we can say these are the salient features by which we can take the important decision. And obviously, for example, if we consider the say image uh, data set, that time we can extract different features related to image, like say shape features, texture features, color features, and so many different features we can extract using different feature extraction technique that we have studied in our image processing techniques. So similarly for signal, audio, video, there are different techniques by which we can extract the features. So that is called the feature engineering. So whenever we are extracting these features, we don't know actually how actually we can describe the object based on these features, whether it fully describe the object or not. Because there are say thousand or more than that type of features are required to distinguish one object from the other object. So that's why it is very challenging task how we can actually extract the features in case of applying the machine learning techniques. But if we apply the deep learning techniques, that time directly without extracting the features, we can directly use the image, and from this pixel value itself, the deep learning can extract the important features. So manually extract the important features is not required in case of deep learning techniques. And obviously, we will discuss gradually the model complexity whenever we compare this to machine learning and deep learning with respect to say classification technique. You know that classification algorithm means the class level is there, and you have to generate some classifier by giving the training based on the data set, and its main objective is to, whenever we are giving some new type of samples, then it will predict its corresponding class level. So after training, our main objective is to predict the class level of unknown sample. So this is the main importance of the classifier, and it is very much useful for almost all the disciplines. So whenever we are simple machine learning techniques if we want to use, so that time different classification algorithms including say decision tree, net-based classifier, similarly random forest, and ensemble classifiers like tagging, boosting, random forest, and so on we can apply, and simply artificial neural network also we can apply for giving the training to the model by the data set. So that model complexity obviously is less compared to the deep learning model, because here we are giving the extracted features to the classifiers. But in case of the deep learning model, we are giving the whole images and we are applying multiple different layers, and so many iterations we are performing for convergence of the model or proper learning of the model. And another point is the data requirement. So data requirement is a very challenging task, and earlier whenever there were not sufficient data available, so that time generally we use the traditional machine learning techniques. But if we have the sufficient data available, then we are using the deep learning techniques. So if we want to apply the deep learning techniques, so our data must be sufficiently available. Otherwise the machine will not provide us the generalized model. So there will be the possibility of overfitting. So to get the generalized model, we need huge volume of data whenever we are applying the deep neural network techniques. And obviously training time is more, and interpretability if we consider, then obviously machine learning is much more interpretable because in case of say decision tree, we know that there is the tree-like structure is there. So from that we can easily understand that if that value is this and that particular attribute value is this, then it belongs to that class. But in case of deep learning, we cannot easily interpret because this acts like a black box. Only we are giving the sample to the black box and we are getting the corresponding prediction of the samples class. And but both have their applications based on different requirements. So now just I will try to just briefly I want to discuss about the artificial neural network, how actually it works. So in case of our biological neurons that we know that how our brain actually works, there are approximately 10,000 11 number of neurons are there, and every neuron interact with almost 10 to the power 4 other neurons to transfer the signals among themselves. So from this we can understand what a complex type of network structure is there in our human brain. And in case of the artificial neural network, we are trying to use this behavior of the biological neural network and corresponding diagram we will generate how actually that nature mimics in case of the artificial neural network. But before that, just take care how they are connected. The neurons we know that corresponding to a single neuron there are many parts like dendrite and nucleus, axon and synapse. Using this synapse actually one neuron is connected with the other neurons and then passes the signals. And dendrite that actually consider the signal that we are supplying. That means whenever say suppose this is a diagram we check our sex organ, suppose we are driving the car, suddenly the red signal comes, so immediately we have to stop the car. So how actually our biological neural network works? So by our sense organ we get this message and transfer this message to the neuron, to the dendrite, and then begin collecting all the signals within this nucleus of the neuron that process this information and passes to the axon, and to the synapse it goes to other neurons and so on. And finally you can understand that we have to stop the car. So that means there are so many neurons and one neuron is connected with many other neurons, and many neurons are active and many neurons may not be active. So as I mentioned, one neuron is connected to 10 to the power 4 neurons in our brain, and some neurons whenever they are giving the signals, some signals may be deactivated and some activated signals may be there. So by which signals are activated, they are again transferring the signal to other neurons, and in this way to the hierarchically the signals are transferred from one hierarchical neural to new set of neurons to another neurons, and finally you can take the decision. So if we compare this with our artificial neural network, then it is just we are taking the information of signals from the dendrite. So here dendrite is equivalent to the our inputs. So that is in case of the artificial neural network, that is called the input layer. So input layer is the set of inputs, that is called the signals that are coming corresponding to the biological neural network. And then we don't know actually how many which, what is the strength of different inputs. So that's why to give the importance to the inputs, we are using here the waves. So that waves are equivalent to the synapse, because to the synapse actually we connect with each other, connects one neuron with another neuron. So that waves are actually giving us like activation. So some waves if they are zero, that means the corresponding neuron is deactivated. And finally that portion is equivalent to this nucleus, where actually first function J, that is the linear function, where it is taking the summation of input plus corresponding wave. And then what actually it is doing, it is applying some activation function to get the activated value. If the value is zero, that means that neuron is not activated, and if the value is some value is there, that means this is activated. And that activated value output, that will pass to another neuron. So in this way, there are hierarchically many neurons are there. So like you can say how actually neural network then works. So this is the input layer, and this is the middle layer, and this is the output layer, say for example. So corresponding to the input layer, we are getting the weights and inputs combination, and we are generating the linear function and apply this to the activation function, and we are getting the activated value. And that value is again the input to the other loop. So in this way there are hierarchy of different layers. So if there is few number of layers, then we say that this is the artificial neural network. And if there are many number of layers, say for example more than 10 number of hidden layers, then we say this is the deep neural network. But the main objective of the hierarchical hidden layer to extract the features from the input. So which features are how much important? So that depends on the corresponding weights. So initially what actually we do? Initially we set some weights randomly, and after that we apply different techniques. For example, say backpropagation algorithm is a popular algorithm by which we actually train the model, and gradually we updated the weights of the different links between the nodes. And after certain iterations or epochs, we can say that the model properly trained, and whatever the weights are there, these are the final weights of the input. So this is the basic actually comparison between the artificial neural network and the deep neural network. So there are many middle layers in case of the deep neural network, because they are extracting directly from the raw data. We are extracting hierarchically different features. Suppose you want to recognize the face, so initially from the raw pixel value, it is extracting the features like say different edges, and then in the next level it is extracting say some hierarchically say high level features like say different shapes, and finally we are getting the total shape of the face. So in this way, in different layers we are extracting different types of features. So from lower level to the higher level. And so basically, as I mentioned that it is important to give the training to the model. Why actually we give the training to the model? Because after giving the proper training, we can rely on this model so that that model can be applied for future prediction. Because initially for any system, many data available. Based on this data, we can give the training to the model. But when new data comes, its corresponding level we have to predict. There is no such level is there. So we apply directly the data without the level to the trained model, and we will get the actual predicted class level. And if here output we have considered 2, because only 2 levels we have considered. If there are multiple number of levels, then we consider in the output layer many number of nodes. So this is actually the initially we are getting the output there, and since this is the supervised type of learning, that means corresponding to the input, actual level is given. So we are comparing the actual class levels with the obtained class, and we are generating the cost function. So what is the cost function then? So cost function is like this, that the predicted value minus the actual value, because in case of supervised learning class level is there, and sum of square error corresponding to all the inputs. Then this one is the error function, and suppose this error function is like this, and our objective is to find out the optimal value. That means we have to gradually put the optimal position where the weights will be the say minimum. So that type of function P, whenever we are applying the gradient descent approach, gradient descent approach means you know the gradient of this means we have to take the derivative of this with respect to the weight function. So then we get summation of this square into this, again derivative of this one, because this one actually is this function, Doppler transform xi. As initially I told that you have to consider the linear combination weight plus weight into input, that summation, and you can apply this to the activation function. If you consider here for simplicity the linear activation function we have considered, that means you are getting the same value. But actually what actually you have to do, you have to apply some activation function here, and that will give some value. And you have consider here the linear activation function that will give, like simply say f of x equal to x. For simplicity we have not considered the activation function like say sigmoid function, Lilly function and so on. We have simply considered the simple linear function. And what is the value to be this one plus derivative of this with respect to w, so we get x. So this one is the actually gradient value. So in case of the gradient descent algorithm, that value you have to gradually update the weights using this equation, that initial new weight equal to initial weight minus some parameter into the gradient. So that is the greater rule in case of the gradient descent algorithm. And what actually happens, this is for the learning rate, and this learning rate we have to say this is called the hyperparameter of this model. But this W is the weights, these are the parameters of the model. And our target is to optimize these parameters during the training. Whenever the model is trained, that means our parameters are optimized. So during this propagation algorithm, gradually actually we move from say initially from this point in the error function to that point, finally we are getting to the optimal point. Or from that side, then gradually we come to the optimal point. So actually how actually we get this? So just check here. Suppose this is our first function. So if initial point is here, so gradient is this one. Gradient is 2 tan theta. So from this one, let's check here we are getting this point. Now that means we are coming to this. That means from that point we are moving to this point. So in this way, and since this portion gradient is greater than 0, and from the rule we are getting this positive value, that means our value gradually decreasing. But if we are that side, that the gradient is negative, and gradient negative means, so this negative into minus, so positive value, so our weights are increasing. So based on the position in the cost function, actually we will check whether the weights of the individual link will increase or decrease in the next iteration. So in the first iteration we are randomly take the weights, and after that we are generating the cost function, and then we are applying the gradient descent algorithm and modify the weight in this way. So we are getting the new weights corresponding to the network model and apply the same process again. So in this way, in the one epoch, what actually we are doing, we are going forward and generating the cost function, and then coming backward and modify the weights of the neural network. Then again in the next epoch, again we are doing the same thing, going forward and then coming backward. So in this way, many times performing that type of going forward and coming backward, finally we are converging. So that we have to say initially how many epochs actually we want, that we have to measure. Because I'll give you one example here also, that how actually by different, if we apply different number of epochs, how the weights are being changed. So before that, just simply I am telling here how actually we can compute the weights. Since the after going forward, we can find out the actual value, like predicted value. But next step is we are going backwards. So whenever we are going backwards, so we have to modify this way, and so on. So we have to modify this from in this direction. So first we have to modify this one, then we have to modify this one. And this is cost function T, that is directly function of this one, but not the function of this one. Because within the cost function, we can use the weights from all these weights. We are not using these weights. So So that's why the cost function is directly depending on the weights which are directly associated with this. That means the weights corresponding to its previous layer, but not to its earlier layer. So whenever we are trying to update this weight, that time we have to apply, that's why the chain rule. So we have to find out the derivative of the cost function with respect to this one. So that time what we have to do, derivative of this with respect to this into derivative of this with respect to this. So that is called the chain rule. So in this way, using the chain rule gradually, we are computing the gradient value and we are updating the weights. So these are the two simple expressions that from this one you can find out all these values. Here we have the sigmoid function. So sigmoid function, you know, sigmoid from x is 1 by 1 plus e to the power minus x, and many other acceleration function also we can use. So main objective is to, whenever we are coming backward, so we have to apply this type of chain rule. So if you are going to the its previous layer, then again another 2 terms will come. So in this way, because finally that one will be here. So that is called the chain rule. By using chain rule, we can compute the gradient and then apply the rule that the weight minus landing weight into this one. So in this way, we can easily modify the weights of every link between every neuron level wise. That means if there are k number of hidden layers, hidden layer 1, hidden layer 2 up to hidden layer k, initially we will update all the weights between last hidden layer and the output layer. After that we will modify the weights between k minus 1 hidden layer with k hidden layer, and finally we will update all the weights between input layer and the first hidden layer. So that is called the one epoch. So in this way, we have to perform many epochs to modify all the weights, because these weights are actually the strength of the neurons. So for simple example, I have considered here 3 inputs and corresponding outputs are there, and by this one we are giving the training to the neural network, and then we want to predict this input what will be its corresponding class level. So it is observed that after using forward propagation and then the backward propagation that I have discussed, if we apply only 10 iterations, then we will get the output 0.65, which is not so reliable, because our output should be, in this case, output should be 1. Just if we check this one, that is 101, which is equivalent to third input, and third input's corresponding output is 1. So this corresponding output should be 1. So that's why after 10 iteration, if we check the class value, then it will give us 0.65. But if we improve the 100 iteration, after that it will give us 0.87. And if we perform 1000 iterations, then we are getting the value which is closest to 1. So in this way, we have to check actually how many iterations we need to perform for proper training of the model. So that's why in case of the deep neural network, since there are so many hidden layers, that's why we use generally the GPU or TPU are used for processing. Okay, so there are different kinds of deep neural networks, including say CNN, and varieties of different architectures of CNN are there. So now actually I will try to discuss 2 deep neural networks where class level is not required. That means that will be unsupervised type of learning using the deep neural network. So for that, why actually we need this one? So that's why we are discussing the importance of representation learning. So what is representation learning? So representation learning means whenever there are suppose different images are there, say medical image or say agricultural, say any image or some other kinds of images. So representation means how actually we represent that image. So that one image is distinguishable from the other image. So how actually one object we can distinguish from the other by its corresponding properties. So we have to represent in such a way that that means you have to extract the such features that easily we can distinguish one image from the other image. So that is called the representation learning. So you have to learn the model in such a way that will represent the images to this learning so that you can separate all the images from one another if they are really different. So to representation is very important, and whenever we will represent this automatically using the deep neural network, that means we don't need the human intervention. So autoencoder is one of such deep neural network which is very much helpful for representation learning. So it is also used for dimensional reduction, and since there is no class level, so unlabeled data we can represent using this autoencoder, and here we use the backpropagation algorithm also. So how we can use this backpropagation algorithm here? Because in case of backpropagation algorithm, you have to generate the cost function. Cost function, you know, is equal to predicted value minus the actual value whole square sum. So predicted value must be there. Class level is not there. See, you can use the backpropagation algorithm here. In case of autoencoder, it consists of actually two different parts. One is the encoder and another one is the decoder. What actually encoder does? Encoder actually take the input image, and using the deep neural network, there may be here within only one hidden layer, there may be many hidden layers, and finally, after extracting, we are getting the value and the output. And this one is there, that one is called the latent space, or say bottleneck. So this latent space is important here, that we are by encoding this, we are encoding the image into the latent space. Like say PCA, principal component analysis, here we reduce the dimension. So here also the area input consists of 6 dimensions, but in latent space only 2 neurons we have considered that is dimension 2. So in this way we can reduce the dimension also using the autoencoder. But whatever we are getting that in the latent space, then using this one, again we are using the decoder and try to construct the actual image. So that is X bar or X cap. So our input is X, final output is X cap. And we are using both encoder and decoder. So both are nothing but the functions. Encoder F, apply X and getting this vector, and decoder use this vector, G of this vector, that will give us X bar. So basically what we are getting basically then from X we are getting X bar, and our objective is to find out the actual image. Because our objective is to reconstruct the image, original image. So for that one, we have to check what is the difference between X cap and X. So that's why we can use here, generate the loss function here also between X and X cap. So we can consider different loss functions like sum of square error, so mean square error loss, that we can consider. We can take here X minus X cap whole square. So one image, if it is of 6 dimensions, so there are dimensions 6 dimensions, dimension are equal to 1 to 6. So sum squares and then their average or mean. So mean square error loss function is this one. So similarly, there are other loss functions like binary cross entropy loss or tail divergence loss, and so many different loss functions are there. We can generate this type of loss functions. And then what actually we do? We can again apply the backpropagation algorithm. So whenever we use the backpropagation algorithm on the cost function, what actually will happen? Just check here, our objective is to get X cap from X, but the construction image will be such that we are getting the actual image. The construction image should be the original image. That is our objective. So that's why if this is the only objective, then what is the purpose of this latent space? You can directly consider that mapping g of fx equal to x. Just check in case of the encoder we have considered fx and then use the decoder that is g of fx. So g of fx equal to x. That means basically we are considering one identity mapping g dot f of x equal to x. Identity mapping we know, say fx equal to x means it is identity mapping. So if we get the identity mapping, that means we have to learn only the identity mapping. So if we learn the identity mapping, then what will be the problem? The problem is that whenever new object will come, that time this model cannot recognize this new object. Only it can learn the trained object only. So that there will be a highly overfitting situation will occur. So that's why though we are trying to reconstruct the original image, at the same time we are giving the sufficient means power to the model so that for unknown samples also it can recognize or it can represent it properly. So that's why we need this regularization. So regularization is the technique by which we can solve the overfitting problem. That means we can try to generate the more generalized model, not the specific model. Whenever the model will be generalized, that means for new type of objects also we can represent it. So that's why instead of using simply the reconstruction laws like say mean square error or binary Poisson entropy and so on, we have to add some penalty. There are so many different penalties already exist or we can think in our own also. That is the L1 regularization, L2 regularization and so on. So these are the penalty that is used with some regularization strength lambda. So this is again the hyperparameter. So these are the hyperparameters lambda, but W is the parameter. So if we add this one, then what is the cost function? Cost function equal to reconstruction loss. That is the mean square error plus this term, penalty term. So whenever we use this, what is our next step? In case of gradient descent, we take the derivative. So whenever we take the derivative, then corresponding to this one, what actually we will get the value, constant value. That will be either say in front of this one, that will be say some constant value, plus 1 or minus 1, or it may be 0 also. If 0, then it is not possible to take the derivative. So basically, this term will be some constant value. That means that whenever we are going to the operation delta rule, that means initial weight minus some learning rate into that gradient value. So that gradient value is a constant value. That means we are reducing this value. And minus this means it is in case of some weights which are very less, corresponding to this, there is the possibility that the corresponding weight will be 0. So that means we are making many links or nodes corresponding activation to 0 by using this one. If initial the weights are very small, then by using this regularization, we are making many neurons deactivated. So that means it encourages the sparsity. So the thing here, densely connected neural network means if every node, next layers, every other nodes are connected. But if we give some 0 value to many nodes, activation nodes, that means many disconnections are there. That means the model must have the capability to self-adaptation. So otherwise what will happen, if all the connections are given, then automatically it will be the kind of spoon fitting. That every information we are giving, so that will be more specific model. So that's why by using this one, actually we are removing some nodes so that the model will be much more generalized model. Like another technique, we know the dropout. Corresponding to every layer, some connection if we just deactivate, then that will be dropout. So this is another kind of say regularization technique. So similarly, F2 regularization is important, especially for high value of W. If the value of W is very much high, then this square we have given here. So that means we are giving the penalty to that type of weights which are very high. So derivative will be 2 into this one, so that will be less. So in this way, if some are very much high, that means they are automatically dominate the others. So we are giving the penalty to that type of weight. So in this way we are trying to generate much more generalized model, so that finally after encoding and decoding, whatever we are getting, that from the encoder we are giving the image, and at the end of the decoder we are getting the actual image. The constructed image should be similar to the actual image. So that is the main objective in case of our auto encoder. So though it is X bar, after many iterations we will get by the decoder the same image X. So then what will happen? So that means now the model is properly trained. If the model is not properly trained, then what is the purpose of decoder? So we don't need now the decoder part. Decoder part is required only for training purpose, training of the model. So now we can easily remove this decoder part, only consider this encoder part. And then now if you have some new image, so predict this new image here, and you will get the output here, which is the latent space vector. So this is the representation of the new image. So in this way, the new image we can represent by the latent space vector. So this one is the latent space one vector. So in this way, by giving different images, we are getting different latent space vectors, all together called the latent space, that consists of the latent space vectors. So that latent space vectors are the representation of the model. So the thing that is the one purpose for dimensional reduction. So we can say directly we can use this for dimensional reduction. And there are varieties of autoencoders. One I have mentioned here, the denoising autoencoder. So what it does, it takes the noisy images and train this by the encoder, and final output will be the actual clean image. So input will be the noise image and output will be the clean image. So how actually you can achieve this? So for that, let's take care how actually what are the different steps here we have considered. For denoising, what we can do, we have some suppose original images are there, and we want to give not the clean images, we want to give the noise images. So for that we can make the images noisy using different steps. So by adding the Gaussian noise, or by drop out some values, or by salt and pepper noise. That means the pixel values we are modifying by different techniques. So finally what we are getting, if the original image is very much clean, and from this one we are getting the noise image. Noise image using any one of or all different techniques. So now what we have the original image and its corresponding noise image. Now we take the noise image as input to the encoder. So if we consider the noise image to the encoder, then what we do? It has the same two different parts, encoder part and the decoder part. So now we have the original image, this is the clean image, and we have made the noise image. And we are giving these noise images to the denoising autoencoder. And then similarly it will follow the encoder and then follow the decoder part, and then we are getting the output. And this output is compared with the original clean image. So that will helpful for defining the reconstruction loss or cost function. So during generating the cost function, we are considering the original one. But we are giving the input, which one we are giving the input? The noisy image. And in this way, after proper training, what actually will happen? That means whenever we give the noisy image, it will give us the clean image. So now if this model is ready or trained properly, now you can consider any noise image and click here and you will get the clean image. So that's why if to train the model, if we don't have the actual clean image, then we cannot apply the denoising autoencoder. So that's why you have to check whether the actual images are there or not. Otherwise, we cannot generate the construct the function, cost function. That's why initially for training purpose we need the original image and we have to make the noise image, apply the noise image to the encoder and get the output and take the difference of output with the original clean image and get the cost function and repeat the process. Finally, what will happen after proper training? We will get the clean image from the noise image. So now if we apply the any other noise image to the denoising autoencoder, then it will provide us the clean image and also it will give us within the latent space, it will give us its corresponding representation also or latent vector also it will provide us. So denoising autoencoder can use for dimensional reduction purpose also and also to generate the clean image from the noise image also. So there also, since we are applying the noise image, that means forcefully we have introduced some noises within the image. So in this case, you may think that we don't need any other regularization technique because we have already introduced the noise. That means we can handle the noise. Means we are giving some regularization technique there. Still, you can use other type of regularization technique also, like say dropout or L1 L2 regularization and so on. Very briefly, I will discuss the difference between this autoencoder and variational autoencoder. So, in case of the autoencoder, we have checked that the corresponding to the input, you are getting the latent vector. That is in the latent space. So, whenever we are applying the same input, we are getting the same latent vector. That means this model is the deterministic model. Autoencoder is the deterministic model because whenever anytime we give one image, its corresponding latent vector is fixed after proper training. But in case of variational autoencoder, it is not deterministic, rather it is probabilistic model. So what actually it will do? It has also the encoder part and decoder part, and in case of the latent space, instead of the vector, here is the probability distribution. So here latent space is the probability distribution. Generally we consider here the Gaussian distribution or normal distribution. So this latent space now is not a single vector, it is the probability distribution. That means it has the mean and variance. So initially suppose latent vector dimension was 3. So only this 3 was there. If we give this input, then only this is the latent vector. So now it is not like this. It will give us the probability distribution. That means it will provide us the mean and the variance. So that is the main difference. That means we are encoding the input to some probability distribution. Instead of encoding to the vector, we are encoding this to some probability distribution. And generally we use the Gaussian distribution. And then the remaining part is similar, that from this probability distribution we are considering some sample, and again using the decoder we are getting the output, and then we are computing the cost function or reconstruction loss function, and we may apply some regularization function also, and then by different epochs finally it will converge. So then that means this probability distribution is properly learned. So after that what we can do, we can take the sample from the probability distribution. That means we are performing the sampling here. So that's why this is called a kind of generative model. So this variational autoencoder is the generative model. will generate new type of samples. So I think the difference between these two you have understood. Here only the latent vector will get, and here we get the probability distribution in case of the directional autoencoder, and it is very much useful for the generating the new samples. And here basically we use the Gale divergence because to know the expression of Gale divergence, this one. So this is our known distribution. Say standard normal distribution with mean 0 and variance 1, and this is our generated distribution. So we are trying to check what is the minimum divergence between these two. Our objective is to minimize the divergence between these two. So that's why this is called a Gale divergence. And we use this because finally our objective is to generate this type of distribution function. That Gaussian distribution you want to generate. So after training you will get the Gaussian distribution. That's why we have used this Gale divergence technique. So we will just check here how we can use this. So one example I will just tell you here. So these are the different medical things I want to mention here for corresponding to the internet of things. You know, there are many different components are connected with each other and share the information. And for medical internet of medical things, we can use the different signals like this, and based on this one we can apply the, suppose the signal that we have got, this is a ECG or EEG, there may be many noise may be there. So you can apply there the denoising autoencoder to get the clean ECG or EEG image. So in this way you can use there the denoising autoencoder. And different data sets are there from where we can easily find out this one. And another application I have mentioned here, that corresponding to suppose agricultural field, by using the drone you are capturing many images, and now you are checking whether their disease exists or not. So what you can do, so you can use the autoencoder and train this only for the clean images. But there is no disease, but that type of images you train the model and you capture the image from the using the drone and then feed this in the autoencoder, and check that corresponding reconstruction loss is very high. That means that particular image that we have captured, that is not the clean image. That means there are some problems, some disease may be there. So in this way we can use variety of deep neural network techniques in different fields, and nowadays to know the for the text data or many generative models are there. So that is a huge field. So we have to think in our own for which domain we are applying the which thing. And finally, another most important concept is the explainability, or we can check whether the whatever we have predicted is explainable or not. For example, using this autoencoder, we have generated the vector, Latin space vector. So now that vector means these are the features, but each features corresponding important how much, that how we can understand. So for that one we have to explain this one. So that means we have to set the weight corresponding to the features. So there are different LLM models are there like say SAT, line and so on. Using this we can measure the explainability of the features, From that we can say which one is most important one, and in this way we can draw the different plotting. Using the different plotting you can check what is the most important feature, which one is the next important feature, and so on. And whatever the classification for medical image we have got, whether this is properly explainable or not, that also we can find out using computing different statistical or some other methods. And so nowadays there are so many different things, like it now comes to AI agents, and collection of this is called the agentic AI. So these are so many different things you can study, and gradually you can apply this in your research work. So thank you for the patience.
Thank you so much, sir, for such an insightful session. And I think your session will surely help the junior researchers in future process. Okay, so we are really delighted to share that we have already got amongst us the 3 session chairs of the first hub today. Professor Dr. Tanmoy Dey, Dr. Shubhamoy Chamdar and Dr. Hemanta Kumar Mondol from NIT Durgapur. I would request our organizing chair, Dr. Arindam Ghosh, to kindly felicitate our session chairs. Sir, Thank you so much, everyone. We would now request our presenters to kindly go to their respective venues for the technical sessions. Thank you. T13.